Well, Juan Pablo, it's great to be with you in this setting, with you in where you are. And I've been looking forward to having this conversation for close to 2 years, maybe 3 years now, since I first learned of your work. And I know that sometimes you say, well, talk to me again in 6 months because I'm going to be sort of offline and out in the woods, that sort of thing. And so I'd love for people who don't know you, they've never heard of you, to share just a little bit at the start so that people have a sense of whether they want to continue watching this or whatever, because I think you're fascinating. And I'd love to have folks be hooked here at the beginning. So give us a sense of who you are, what you're committed to, what your values are, that sort of thing. And I'll ask a little bit further down the line more of your story, but just help us sort of get who you are and what you're contributing at this time.
My name is Juan Pablo. You can call me JP. I've been involved with like survival and wilderness skills for the last few years. Some of the things that I've done, I wrote a book called Thrive about long-term wilderness survival. I won the show Alone on the History Channel. It's a really good reality show. And I've also spent lots of time in the forest. Like in 2016, I went with my partner for 6 months, and I think I have a little bit of a different perspective than most people, just because I've slowly changed my allegiance from civilization into nature. And just being out there for a long time makes you realize a lot of things about civilization that you don't see when you're in it. So I think that's what I bring to the table. And I'm from Mexico. I was born and raised there, spent 18 years of my life there. Most of my life has been spent in Mexico. So I have a little bit of a different cultural perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And you said it rather quickly, but I want you to just mention again. So you were on season 9 or something of Survivor, and you won, or what? Say more about that.
Yeah, there's this show Alone where people go into the wilderness. There's 10 people that go with 10 items and clothes and camera, and they document their journey. And the objective is to stay the longest there, and the longest person that stays there wins $500,000. And I won season 9 of that show. I stayed 78 days in Labrador, which is a very challenging location. Yeah,
That's
so
great.
that's what the show's about.
Okay, good. And the show is called Alone.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Great. Well, I've been using language in this series. You, I think, are the 91st person or 92nd person that I've had a post-Doom conversation with over the last almost 4 years now. And so I just want to find out, how do you language our predicament in our times? I mean, I've been using language like pre-Doom, Doom, and post-Doom. And what I mean by post-Doom is like, you get that things are collapsing, but then you live with joy and service and as a blessing to others in the process. I've got 3 definitions of doom and 3 definitions of post-doom on the post-doom website. But what language do you find yourself using to point to our predicament and the possibilities, not just the downsides of our predicament, but what's possible? What are the opportunities?
Well, I've been studying the subject like since a very young age. I knew about climate change. I knew about some of the predicaments of our time, and very early on, I was like, "Oh yeah, we're definitely gonna crash with this one." So at the same time, I've been coming and going with the topic and how to approach it. And lately, in the last few years, it has pushed me into doing things that I have been postponing. Like, for instance, I always wanted to build a cabin in the woods and live there for a little bit. So I'm doing that right now. I'm actually right now building a small cabin and trying to grow food and try to be as self-sufficient as possible. I've always wanted to do that. So to me, the topic just has pushed me more, just given me more reasons to do it.
And
So I don't,
are you in Mexico now? Like what part of the world are you?
yeah, right now I am in the boreal forest in Canada.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Quite different than Mexico. Have you had to deal with some of the wildfires and the smoke this summer?
Yeah, fortunately, not a lot of smoke. Um, and the wildfires haven't been too close to me. But yeah, I'm definitely thinking a lot about fires and how to fireproof my place for sure.
Yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet. Well, a little bit about, I mean, how old are you?
I'm 32.
Okay, great. So you're just younger than my I've got a daughter that's 33. So say something about one of the things that's been at the heart of this post-Dune conversation series is inviting my guests to share a little bit about their own story, their pilgrimage, their trajectory. How did they, what kind of a worldview were they raised in? How did they come to accept things like overshoot or collapse or abrupt climate change or any of that kind of stuff? And then what led them to the worldview that they now and lifestyle that they now have. So feel free to take some time and just sort of walk us through that your story.
Yeah. I'd say I've because I'm from Mexico and I've been um close to inequalities in our modern life. Um, that has made me skeptical, I guess, about the benefits of industrial civilization. Naturally, I think people, maybe North America, might not be as directly exposed to the inequalities that happen, even though there's plenty here too. But in Mexico, for me growing up personally, it was very like in front of me. So I'm being very realistic about e- everything that we have as a benefit also has a drawback.
Mhm.
So that's where I'm starting from is my culture, and then slowly with time I've been doing longer and longer trips. Like I once did the Pacific Crest Trail, hike from Mexico to Canada for 99 days, and from then on I've just done longer and longer periods in nature.
And you've done generally done these solo, or have you had a partner for some of these?
Yeah, some I did solo and some with my partner, and I guess that gives you a lot of time to think about things and a lot of perspective. Like when you go on a camping trip, after, especially if I bring young people on a camping trip that they've never camped before or a few times, like day three, they already want a hamburger. Um, they have like this crazy craving. So it's funny how camping gives you a lot of perspective. So now, if you extrapolate that, what you get with a 2-3 day camping trip, what you get with a 6 months is like you get a lot of perspective, not on just civilization, but society, relationships, like you name it. There's lots of time to think and lots of time to um, see the change and the different, yeah, just the different perspectives.
Yeah, I'm in some ways you strike me, or at least when you know, have been reading about you and your skills and that sort of thing. You strike me somewhat similar to as a very, very young, sort of a grandson version of somebody who I spent some time training with in the 1980s, Tom Brown, the tracker. And I found during that time the wilderness survival skills and attention and noticing, both the sort of practical but also observational skills of living in and with the living world, as a community of life rather than as it to be exploited as much of civilization does. And so I'm wondering if you can, sort of again coming back to your story. I want to hear more in terms of how you got to your current worldview and practice. But also, I definitely want to ask you about your book and I mean the title "Thrive: Long-Term Wilderness Survival Guide: Skills, Tips, and Gear for Living on the Land." And so I'm imagining that that book is full. I know that it's also, you got so many illustrations and all, but that you really do intersect with a lot of people across the political spectrum, from survivalists to environmentalists and different people who are in some senses craving a guide, a teacher, someone who can help them live more intimately, more personally, more respectfully, more sustainably with the land. And so, anyway, so come back to your story, but also share sort of how that book came to be and how it's been received as well.
I think you're right on your sense that I have interacted with people from like all spectrums. I do consider myself open to these very diverse opinions. Like I I think I can have a conversation with anyone and be okay with it, even though they're completely against my beliefs, or even though they're attacking my beliefs or whatever. Like um I never had that sense of like that being a bad thing, or that I should be uncomfortable with someone that's not espousing my views. I don't get where people get that from. To me, it's just okay completely. And I think it's great that we talk with people that are like that have completely different ideas of the world. I think
I
it's
agree.
enriching and it's great for both of us. Um, my book came from just notes that I've been doing for a long time. Every time I spend time outside, and I knew I wanted to write a book, so I was putting notes. There's also lots of research in it. Um, and it basically is a gift to the community, because there's no book that's about living in the forest precisely. Most of the books out there, they're just about what to do if you're lost or your plane crashes or whatever, just to get rescued. So this is a completely different perspective on what if you wanted to be there. Yeah, so that's basically my book in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's rare in my experience to have over 100 reviews on Amazon, and damn near all of them are 5-star. It's that in itself says, okay, this book is being well received.
Yeah, they're not bought, because
Yes.
many reviews on Amazon are bought. But
Oh,
yeah,
really? Oh, yeah. I don't know anything about that. My only book that was mentioned on Amazon was 15 years ago. Thank God for evolution. So I'm curious, how do you understand our predicament? What do you see as some of the main causes of the challenges that we are facing as a species? And what is your message to young people? But also, what's your message to the over 50 crowd or the retired crowd, and how do those differ?
yeah. The first thing I would say is that I see the world as an emergent property. Um, I don't see any guidance or things like that. I just see lots of very different things um, interacting with each other, and then it's creating our emergent world. That's my my vision, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, And I think we humans are just another species that got too good at reproducing, and obviously that has led to overshoot. That has led to many externalities, many things that are not good for the environment and for other creatures. So basically, I don't think our species is flawed
Yeah, I agree.
necessarily. I think I do think that there was no way around this. I think that the culture that was going to become dominant was going to be a culture of destroying the world, and it's succeeding. And I think there was a natural evolution at that. Like, um, I think that I don't think indigenous cultures were born self-sufficient,
Right.
because we all come from hunter-gatherers. We all come from indigenous cultures, but some of those cultures learn about self self yeah, like being um sustainable.
Hmm.
But our civilization is definitely completely unsustainable, and it's just gonna run its course. And unsustainable just means that it will have an end. So I don't see how collapse is such a um what's the word, it's not surprising, collapse is not surprising because it's just very obvious. Like, our civilization is unsustainable, that means it will end. That's it. um
Yeah, and that's going to be a lot less scary for somebody with your skill set than somebody who's utterly dependent upon technology and electricity and all of the amenities of civilization. And they know that without them, they would probably die in less than a month. It's going to be far more scary for somebody in that shoe than those shoes.
yeah, I agree, but that doesn't mean that because of my skill set I'm less real about what that entails. um I think, if anything, maybe I think it's even more real for me, because I know, I really know what's in like a liter of gasoline in terms of energy. I know how difficult it is to grow food for people, to like feed yourself by natural means. Like, so, but I do agree that probably having more of a nature allegiance makes you more open to that notion of maybe industrial civilization is not also great, and um, yeah, maybe there's things that are wrong about it. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly see things that are many things that are self-destructive. I'm curious, how do you stay inspired on a day by day or week by week basis? Like, what are the practices or exercises or what tools do you use or do you have at your disposal that help you stay on purpose and in a mostly positive space in the midst of a contracting, collapsing civilization?
Yeah, I I see um a lot of people, especially young people, like just um basically tuning off, let it rot basically, like in Hong Kong. But to me, is right now it's basically the calm before the storm. I think what keeps me focused is just the fact that, like, right now the world, first of all, the only thing we have is the present, right? And we need to live our life a day at a time. And like, this all comes back to that, and the the denial of that, right? We all are gonna die. It's the same thing. um that doesn't mean that just because you're gonna die, you're gonna sit down and stay in bed for the rest of your life. You're gonna do things. You're gonna leave. It's exactly same thing. And I think right now there's a lot of things that can be done to improve life for everyone and for yourself, especially. Like, start with yourself and your family. um that would be my advice for young people: is don't, like, it's okay to be in despair. It's okay to be there. It's okay to be sad, to be hopeless, but don't stay there. Like, that's just one of the many facets of understanding what's going on. um and in time, you can arrive to a place where you know what can actually be more helpful and more appropriate given our circumstances, instead of giving off energy to things that might not be very wise or appropriate. um that's my advice for young people. And older people would be support those young people.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And what would your coaching or support be? How would you speak to somebody, say, who's a mother or a father of an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 2-year-old? How do you coach, or how do you speak to families, especially young families?
Like, in the Dumosphere, in the collapse communities, I see a lot of people, for instance, talking about, oh, you shouldn't have kids because you're putting another soul through suffering. Um, this is a very controversial topic, but as you can see, I'm not scared of any topics. But um, so these people are encouraging others not to have kids because they see the world is their world is ending. Civilization is on the suicidal path, so they see that as something that's wrong, that civilization's ending. But I don't think it's wrong that it's ending. But my, what I would say to these people, for instance, I'm contemplating having kids, right, with my partner. And the way I see it is, there was never a time in our lives when it was guaranteed that you were going to have a good time, that you were going to not suffer, that your child would have a better life expectancy. Like, it was never a guarantee. Even when it
Exactly.
happened, it was just something that was okay. Like, you don't know, you never know with these things. So all the people, I'm not saying have 10 kids. Obviously, mind over population, it's a thing. But at the same time, is don't worry too much about that, because we never had any guarantees. It's not, we've gone through many of these type of things, like collapses and die-offs and extinction events. We've gone through all that, and we've gone through wars and unimaginable things and horrors. And people, like, that's life. Life,
Yeah.
in some ways, is suffering. So it kind of defeats the purpose of, I guess it's a very philosophical question, but at the same time, I guess it tells a lot about where you're coming from. um your thought about having kids in a situation where things are getting worse and worse. I Sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but it's actually a very dense question, but it's very telling, because your response, it's almost a mirror of how you see life. and how you see hardship. So
Yes.
if you embrace that, but you see that there's still joy in suffering, there's still joy in these things, then you'll be more open to having kids, I think. Um,
Yeah,
and
well,
I don't.
it's interesting the timing of me asking you that question and then your response. As you were talking, I heard my phone buzz over there, and I could look and I could see, and it was my 33-year-old daughter was calling. I'll call her back after this conversation. But I had a real major transformation about 5 years ago when they had gotten married, and they were talking about the possibility of having a child. And I was filled with a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety about that. And this one day I was down, it was actually in late July, 5 years ago, and I had this wave of trust that washed over me. And I thought to myself, even if the worst case scenario, even if this is one of the last generations or the last generation of human women to have children, would I really want my daughter to not have that experience? And so I had, where I had fear before, I had trust. And so I called her up and we had this deeply tearful conversation. And I told her that I'm a full throated, big hearted amen to whatever they choose, whatever they wanted to do. And they ended up actually getting pregnant just a few weeks after that, and now have a 3-year-old, our 3-year-old granddaughter. And for every day or week of suffering that she will experience, which she will, no question, she's giving and receiving weeks and months of love and joy. And I've never seen a situation where two adults, my daughter and my son-in-law, have in many ways been transformed from living for themselves to now living for this larger being, or this, in this case, the smaller being. But they've got something larger than themselves to live for. And so I understand, because I've been attacked some in the Reddit collapse community on this issue of antinatalism. And I had this young guy one time just attack me. He's just a pro-natalist. I had to look it up. Like, what's that mean? Oh, I'm not against children. Okay, yeah, guilty as accused, Your Honor. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. And I thought it was delightful that my daughter called right as that was happening. Well, Juan Pablo, I want to come back to, how do you who have been the authors or the books or the movements? Like, what have been the formative things in your own journey that have helped you get to the place where you now are?
I guess the first thing, I guess, was just, I gotta say, school in Mexico, just learning about like these things in like early on. I think that's quite helpful because you're more open-minded. Um, and and then something that really marked my way of thinking was actually the IPCC reports. I think in 2018 they came with a report that was something like, we have 12 years or whatever thing to change things around. So to me, that really was a wake-up call. And I'm not making everything about climate change, because climate change is just but a small portion of things. But climate change is a bit of something that we can time well,
Exactly.
kind of. So that's why I think um, it brings a level of urgency to the question of the whole predicament. But I know it's just but one aspect. But this one aspect with the IPCC report, it really turned things around for me, because it got me into a mindset of, okay, like um, this is where things start to evolve more rapidly. So after that, I just read more about the topic, studied a little bit more, and got into doing things more. Yeah,
And how
I
did you get
wanted
in?
to.
How did you get into long-term survival kinds of stuff? How did that transition happen?
For long-term stuff, long-term survival, it's always been a passion for me. Like growing up watching TV about Steve Irwin or Ray Mears, people like that. They really inspire me. And just being in nature, I've always wanted adventure. I like risk, not too much risk, but I like having that freedom and adventure.
Mhm.
That's something I really appreciate. So that's why I've always been pulled into nature.
Yeah,
So that's where all my skills are coming from.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Well, JP, anything else you'd like to say to bring this conversation to completion on? It doesn't have to be about post doom or the collapsosphere, but anything that you'd like to share. And then how can people, where should people go to learn more about your work?
Um, yeah, this conversation was all over the place. That's funny. So some of the things that I wish more people would be talking about are the things that are appropriate to do right now. Like, um, to me, just we need to support initiatives that make sense in the context of our predicament, and oppose initiatives that don't make sense in this context. And to me, changing the overtone window, um, just telling the truth of our predicament, and just having more dialogue, making easier for people that are in this same understanding to find each other and have interactions and conversations. I think that's a big thing. I think we should be slowing the machine, and that means um like we can divest from financial companies and legal sabotage. um and we should I see lots of people despairing and being like, oh yeah, it's all going to shit and we're all gonna die, so now I'm just gonna sit in my couch. And I think that these people are a little bit detached from reality, because no, you're gonna have to get water, and you're gonna have to find a place where you can poop, and etc etc. There's so many things that can be done and we should be doing. So um yeah, just do things. That would be my advice. And that's very therapeutic, not only
Yes.
doing, but also, like, because I see the world as emerging from our actions. um I think that if you also oppose things, in a way, like if you act against industrial civilization in some ways, that is also therapeutic. um yeah, and helping yourself is therapeutic, because there's so much despair out there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I found myself saying in a conversation just last week on this topic is that anything and everything that you can do to promote or strengthen or encourage ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness is a good thing to do. Whether it works in the long run or not is secondary. It allows you to pass the mirror test, to feel good about yourself, and it's as you say, it's an inspiration to yourself on a daily basis to do something that's right, something that's ecological, something that's just. Um, uh, Even in terms of the kinds of slow, I don't personally have a whole lot of faith that we're going to be able to slow or stop or reverse the the devastation that the global industrial society is doing. But nonetheless, pursuing that work as if we could is deeply soul nourishing, and it can make a difference at certain local levels. And so it's good work to do. Whether it's effective at any large scale or not, who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Cool. Well, so how do people learn about you? Where do they go for your, like, your? I mean, obviously your book Thrive. the title Thrive, Long-Term Wilderness Survival Skills on Amazon or elsewhere. But where else can people learn about your work?
Yeah, I also have a website called jpquiñonez.com. I also have an Instagram, same thing, JP Quiñonez.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, JP, this has been a long time coming. Like I said, I learned about your work in mid 2019, I think, first time when I originally reached out to you. And so I'm grateful that we were able to make this happen. And because we had the conversation prior to this recording, I just want to make it official that you were one of the few people as a colleague who reached out and challenged me because I had been sort of using NTHE, near-term human extinction, a little too blithely or a little bit too sloppily. And I received that challenge that you have, and I've now gone to using NTGD, near-term ginormous die-off, because I think that's pretty inarguable. But I think that to focus on extinction really misses the point, that we are in a contraction, we are in an overshoot, we're in collapse. And so how do we support each other in living as full and integrous and joyous lives as possible in that reality? And focusing on extinction or not is usually distracting. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for being open to that, and I'm glad you didn't take it off as like an attack or anything like that, you know.
No, I thought here's a young man with the balls to challenge me, and I'm grateful that he did. So thank you.